Writer Jenny Miller went through a terrible breakup. Her ex's parting words: "I'll keep you in the top 8 of my MySpace friends." Talk about a slam. No one uses MySpace anymore. Soon afterward, her grandfather died. Soon after that, she bought a house and signed the paperwork just months before the recession hit. "I did not handle this well," Miller wrote in a widely shared 2014 column headlined, "Running as Therapy," for the New York Times. "As I was helping my mother pack up her parents' house, I found myself too drained to move and laid down on the floor and sobbed. My mother suggested I try therapy. I signed up for a 10-mile race instead." That column could be seen as an early draft of Miller's memoir, Running, her love story, which is out this week. In it, she details her lifelong relationship with the sport and how the simple act of putting one foot in front of another over 10, 15, or 26.2 miles brought back her mental clarity. In her book, Miller distances herself from the Times headline, writing that she probably should have sought professional help, and that she doesn't mean to suggest self-care is an adequate treatment for the depressed. And it's true that many severely depressed people are so ill that physical activity becomes impossible. It is also true that seeking professional help is crucial for those who struggle with mental health issues. But it is also true that for many people who are depressed, physical activity, and running in particular, helps tremendously. Now, an intriguing line of research is suggesting that, for some, a combination of physical and mental training, called MAP training, may provide substantial help to those with major depressive disorder. Studies have already suggested that physical activity can play a powerful role in reducing depression. Newer, separate research is showing that meditation does, too. Now, some exercise scientists and neuroscientists believe there may be a uniquely powerful benefit in combining the two. In one study, published last week in the Nature journal Translational Psychiatry, a team led by Brandon Alderman at Rutgers University found that MAP training reduced depressive symptoms in a group of young people with major depressive disorder, and by an impressive margin, 40% on average, the data show. The reason why this works is not yet clear, but Alderman and his colleagues have a hunch taken from the neurogenesis theory of depression. Not long ago, scientists believed that by adulthood your brain had already produced all the neurons it ever would. Recent research, however, has shown that some regions, including the hippocampus, generate brand new neurons throughout the lifespan. But in some, not all, but some, depressed people, the hippocampus generates fewer new neurons than in non-depressed people. This may be one of the reasons that antidepressants work. In addition to increasing serotonin production, the medications may also increase neurogenesis. This, by the way, is one of the weirder facts of pharmaceutical research. Many drugs work even though their inventors are not totally sure why they work. And yet antidepressants are likely not the only way of increasing the birth of these new neurons, though this is where things get a little theoretical. Increased neurogenesis has not yet been observed in humans. The technology does not yet exist for that. But animal studies have suggested that aerobic exercise, in particular running, can double the amount of new neurons produced in the brains of mice. The problem is that these newborn neurons don't stick around for very long, even under healthy conditions. Many of these new cells can die within several weeks of being born, often before differentiating into mature neurons. Alderman and his colleagues write in the paper, Enter Meditation. Those newly generated brain cells can be rescued from death by new learning experiences, the researchers write. For instance, research has shown that aerobic exercise increases the production of new neurons in the adult brain, while effortful mental training experiences keep a significant number of those cells alive. So what would happen if the two were paired? To test this, Alderman and his colleagues recruited 52 young adults, 22 of whom had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder and referred by a university counseling clinic. The rest of the participants were typically healthy individuals. Twice a week for 8 weeks. All of the study volunteers reported to the lab for MAP training sessions, during which they spent 30 minutes in focused attention meditation and 30 minutes running on a treadmill. At the start of the study, they all took surveys measuring the depression symptoms, as well as a test designed to measure the cognitive control, that is, their ability to harness their own attention. They repeated these tasks at the study's conclusion, and the researchers' analysis shows a decrease in self-reported depressive symptoms for both groups, but especially for the group with major depressive disorder. Both groups improved the performance on the cognitive control test, too. Again, the why factor here is not so clear. But here's the theory. The hippocampus is associated with both learning and memory, short-term episodic memory specifically. You can think back to your last birthday because it was an episode in your life, and the hippocampus is thought to help you do that. In focused attention meditation, the person learns how to focus her thoughts on one steady thing, often her own breath. If her thoughts drift, she acknowledges the change and simply returns her attention back to her breath. With practice, the person learns to recognize deviations of attention. Alderman and his colleagues write, thereby acquiring new skills that can help direct attention to the present moment, not only during meditation but also in everyday life. Maybe, they argue, the newborn neurons in the hippocampus brought forth by running and nurtured by meditation helped the study participants do this. Then again, maybe not. These researchers didn't test the reason why this change in depressive symptoms might be happening, they simply noted that it happened. But it's the second such study to point to the power of running and meditation when paired together. In a smaller, earlier study, Alderman and a team of scientists did a version of this very same research project, only with a much more troubled population. Recently homeless young mothers, most of whom had a history not only of depression but of addiction and sexual or physical abuse, too. In the RUT study, the young women's depression symptoms dropped nearly in half. For some people, then, there may indeed be considerable power in focusing on the body and the mind. In her book, Miller mostly sticks to her personal narrative, but she also considers the sometimes transformative nature of her sport. She quotes Catherine Jefferts Shorey, the 26th presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, who also happens to be a marathoner, is saying, "Runners begin to understand the blessing that comes with putting the body to work and emptying the mind." Miller adds, she was referring to prayer, but I had stopped going to church in college. Those long runs were the closest I came to going back. When I first started training for marathons a little over 10 years ago, my coach told me something I've never forgotten. That I would need to learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I didn't know it at the time, but that skill, cultivated through running, would help me as much, if not more, off the road as it would on it. It's not just me, and it's not just running. Ask anyone whose day regularly includes a hard bike ride, sprints in the pool, a complex problem on the climbing wall, or a progressive powerlifting circuit, and they'll likely tell you the same. A difficult conversation just doesn't seem so difficult anymore. A tight deadline not so intimidating. Relationship problems not so problematic. Maybe it's that if you're regularly working out, you're simply too tired to care. But that's probably not the case. Research shows that, if anything, physical activity boosts short-term brain function and heightens awareness. And even on days they don't train, which rules out fatigue as a factor, those who habitually push their bodies tend to confront daily stressor with a stoic demeanor. While the traditional benefits of vigorous exercise, like prevention and treatment of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, and osteoporosis, are well known and often reported, the most powerful benefit might be the lesson that my coach imparted to me. In a world where comfort is king, arduous physical activity provides a rare opportunity to practice suffering. Few hone this skill better than professional endurance and adventure athletes, who make a living withstanding conditions others cannot. For my column with Outside Magazine, I've had the privilege of interviewing the world's top endurance and adventure athletes on the practices underlying the success. Regardless of sport, the most resounding theme, by far, is that they've all learned how to embrace uncomfortable situations. Olympic marathoner Des Linden told me that at mile 20 of 26.2, when the inevitable suffering kicks in, through years of practice she's learned to stay relaxed and in the moment. She repeats the mantra, calm, 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 relax, relax, relax. World champion big wave surfer Nick Lamb says being uncomfortable, and even afraid, is a prerequisite to riding 4-story waves. But he also knows it's a path to personal development. He's learned that while you can pull back, you can almost always push through. Pushing through is courage. Pulling back is regret, he says. Free soloist Alex Honnold explains that the only way to deal with pain is practice. I get used to it during training so that when it happens on big climbs, it feels normal. Evelyn Stevens, the women's record holder for most miles cycled in an hour, 29.81, yes, that's nuts, says that during her hardest training intervals, instead of thinking I want these to be over, I try to feel and sit with the pain. Heck, I even try to embrace it. Big mountain climber Jimmy Chin, the first American to climb up and then ski down Mount Everest South Pillar route, told me an element of fear is there in everything he does, but he's learned how to manage it. It's about sorting out perceived risk from real risk, and then being as rational as possible with what's left. But you don't need to scale massive vertical pitches or run 5-minute miles to reap the benefits. Simply training for your first half-marathon or CrossFit competition can also yield huge dividends that carry over into other areas of life. In the words of Kelly Starrett, one of the founding fathers of the CrossFit movement, anyone can benefit from cultivating a physical practice. Science backs him up. A study published in the British Journal of Health Psychology found that college students who went from not exercising at all to even a modest program, just 2 to 3 gym visits per week, reported a decrease in stress, smoking, alcohol and caffeine consumption, an increase in healthy eating and maintenance of household chores, and better spending and study habits. In addition to these real-life improvements after 2 months of regular exercise, the students also performed better on laboratory tests of self-control. This led the researchers to speculate that exercise had a powerful impact on the students' capacity for self-regulation. In laypeople's terms, pushing through the discomfort associated with exercise, saying yes when the bodies and minds were telling them to say no, taught the students to stay cool, calm, and collected in the face of difficulty, whether that meant better managing stress, drinking less, or studying more. For this reason, the author Charles Duhigg, in his 2012 bestseller The Power of Habit, calls exercise a keystone habit, or a change in one area of life that brings about positive effects in other areas. Duhigg says keystone habits are powerful because they change our sense of self and our sense of what is possible. This explains why the charity Back on My Feet uses running to help individuals who are re-experiencing homelessness improve the situations. Since launching in 2009, Back on My Feet has had over 5,500 runners, 40% of whom have gained employment after starting to run with the group and 25% of whom have found permanent housing. This is also likely why it's so common to hear about people who started training for a marathon to help them get over a divorce or even the death of a loved one. Another study, this one published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology, evaluated how exercise changes our physiological response to stress. Researchers at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, in Germany, divided students into 2 groups at the beginning of the semester and instructed half to run twice a week for 20 weeks. At the end of the 20 weeks, which coincided with a particularly stressful time for the students' exams, the researchers had the students wear heart rate monitors to measure the heart rate variability, which is a common indicator of physiological stress. The more variability, the less stress. As you might guess by now, the students who were enrolled in the running program showed significantly greater heart rate variability. The bodies literally were not as stressed during exams. They were more comfortable during a generally uncomfortable time. What's remarkable and encouraging about these studies is that the subjects weren't exercising at heroic intensities or volumes. They were simply doing something that was physically challenging for them, going from no exercise to some exercise. One need not be an elite athlete or fitness nerd to reap the bulletproofing benefit of exercise. Why does any of this matter? For one, articles that claim prioritizing big fitness goals is a waste of time. Exhibit A. Don't run the marathon are downright wrong. But far more important than internet banter, perhaps a broader reframing of exercise is in order. Exercise isn't just about helping out your health down the road, and it's certainly not just about vanity. What you do in the gym, or on the roads, in the ocean, etc., makes you a better, higher-performing person outside of it. The truth, cliché as it may sound, is this. When you develop physical fitness, you're developing life fitness, too.